Welcome. Today, we're taking a detailed look at the life and career of Brad Renfro.
He was an American actor who, really against all odds, achieved this extraordinary fame when he was just 11 years old.
His trajectory was one of intense, blinding promise. But as we'll see from the records, it was unfortunately bracketed by these profound personal struggles.
Struggles that ended his career and his life tragically early. He was only 25.
It is an intensely painful story to review.
It is, because the documentation we have suggests not just a loss of talent, but, well, something of a systemic failure.
We've been examining the records that detail his almost impossible discovery story, the critical heights he reached almost immediately.
And then the sad, very public timeline of his struggles with addiction and with the legal system.
And critically, the questions his life continues to raise about how the industry protects, or maybe fails to protect, its young, vulnerable actors.
That's precisely our focus, to explore this material thoroughly.
We want to maintain a factual presentation while we look at the deeper implications of his short life.
Right, we need to understand not just what happened, but maybe get a sense of why the pressures seem to escalate so quickly for him.
So let's start right at the very beginning. Let's set the scene in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is where he was born and ultimately discovered.
Okay, so Brad Renfro was born on July 25, 1982, and his origins were firmly working class.
His father, Mark Renfro, was a factory worker.
Yes, but his formative years were marked by instability very early on. His parents divorced.
And from the age of 5, the records show he was primarily raised by his paternal grandmother, Joanne Renfro,
a church secretary. And sources consistently indicate he didn't really have a close relationship with his father.
And that sense of disruption, that necessity for an early self-sufficiency, that's key here.
It absolutely is. It provides the crucial context for his discovery.
Because when Hollywood came looking, they weren't looking for some polished talent.
No, they were looking for exactly the kind of toughness that can arise from that kind of background.
And that's where the story takes a turn, that is. Well, it's almost unbelievable in modern Hollywood terms.
It is. He had absolutely zero acting experience, no formal training whatsoever.
In 1992, at 10 years old, he was living in a trailer park just outside Knoxville with his grandmother.
And that's when the casting director, Mally Finn, discovered him for the adaptation of John Grisham's novel, The Client.
He wasn't found at some competitive drama school or an audition in L.A.?
No. He was recommended to Finn by a man named Dennis Bowman,
a retired Knoxville police officer who was running the local DARE program.
Which is an irony, that is.
Yeah.
It's just impossible to ignore, looking at what came later.
It is. Bowman had been completely captivated by what he called Renfro's innate charm and street smarts.
And that phrase, street smarts, that is the absolute fulcrum upon which his entire career pivots.
It really is. The director, Joel Schumacher, made it very clear what he wanted.
He did. He didn't want a typical Hollywood kid. He was actively seeking a tough kid for the lead role of Mark Sway.
Someone who, as he reportedly put it, understood in the marrow of his psyche what it was like to grow up too soon.
This wasn't just casting for authenticity. It was casting for an experience of hardship.
And what's interesting is that the novelist, John Grisham, he apparently reinforced this.
He did. He insisted that the chosen actor had to be an unknown from Tennessee.
So this was a very deliberate search for raw, untrained, authentic talent from that specific region.
Precisely. And Renfro fit that description perfectly. He secured the lead role in The Client in 1994.
The sheer scope of this achievement, you can't overstate it. He beat out approximately 5,000 other boys.
5,000. And among those 5,000 was Macaulay Culkin,
who at that time was probably the biggest child star in the world.
Without a doubt. So that detail alone, it just signals the immediate power of Renfro's presence on screen.
To dethrone the reigning king of child actors with zero training, it speaks volumes about the raw, visceral appeal he possessed.
And the result was instantaneous. It was explosive success.
The Client was a box office phenomenon. It ranked among the top-grossing films of 1994.
So Renfro went from total obscurity in a trailer park to being a major Hollywood star, seemingly overnight.
This immediate visibility garnered immediate industry validation, too. They recognized this raw talent right away.
Yes, in 1995, he won the Hollywood Reporter's Young Star Award for his debut performance in The Client.
And the momentum was just relentless.
It was. A year later, 1996, he was nominated as one of People magazine's influential 30 under 30 list,
Think about that for a moment. He was barely a teenager.
and already recognized as one of the 30 most powerful or promising young people in the entire country. The speed of this rise,
Yeah.
it left almost no time for him to adapt to the reality of fame.
It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? The film, The Client, it centers on a child who is trying desperately to find adult protection from these forces trying to hurt him. Yet, the actor playing him was chosen because he projected the kind of self-sufficiency and street smarts that, well, it seems the industry felt he didn't require much oversight when the camera stopped rolling.
And that really does set the stage for everything that follows.
So, following this huge breakthrough, Renfro maintained an extraordinarily prolific schedule all through the mid-90s.
He took on roles that truly demanded intensity and confirmed he wasn't just a flash in the pan.
The records show this rapid continuation. In 1995, he took on the iconic role of Huckleberry Finn in Tom and Huck.
A move that really cemented his status as a viable, marketable star who could carry a period piece.
And alongside that commercial success, he continued to earn critical accolades.
He was highly praised for his performance in The Cure,
Right, the film that explores the profound bond between two young boys, one of whom has AIDS.
a very heavy topic for a young actor. And that role won him his second Young Star Award, along with a Young Artist Award.
So it highlighted his dramatic range beyond just the legal thriller genre where he started.
He then quickly moved into these high-profile ensemble projects, most notably Sleepers in 1996, directed by Barry Levinson.
In that film, he played the younger version of Brad Pitt's character, Michael Sullivan.
And he was sharing screen time with absolute heavy hitters like Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, Kevin Bacon.
It validated his standing among Hollywood's elite, for sure. Then the following year, he starred in Telling Lies in America.
But the zenith of his critical recognition, arguably, came in 1998 with Apt Pupil,
That was the Bryan Singer adaptation of the very dark Stephen King novella.
a very dark story. Renfro played Todd Bowden, a brilliant but, well, a deeply disturbed high school student.
And he blackmails a former Nazi concentration camp commandant who is living secretly in his neighborhood.
It's a psychological thriller, and it required immense maturity and a real darkness from a teenager.
And his performance was globally recognized. He won the Best Actor award at the Tokyo International Film Festival for the role.
He was also nominated for a Saturn Award. So at 16, he's being lauded on the international circuit for portraying this extremely complex moral decay.
Now, what's critically important to observe here is the shift that occurred almost immediately after this high watermark.
Yes, post-1998, the quality and the visibility of his projects, they changed drastically.
Many subsequent films, the sources indicate, received very little attention.
The majority of them went straight to video rather than getting wide theatrical releases. The initial trajectory was slowing dramatically.
It speaks to the difficulty of transitioning from a sought-after child star to a reliable adult leading man.
A struggle that was compounded, as we're about to discuss, by the growing public knowledge of his personal issues.
This forced him into some truly unique, almost niche roles.
Absolutely. The documentation provides some fascinating examples of this shifting focus.
He played the protagonist Leon S. Kennedy in a live-action promotional ad for the video game Resident Evil 2.
Right, and this wasn't just a typical commercial. This was a high-production short film directed by George A. Romero, specifically for the Japanese market.
It shows him actively seeking work in non-traditional media.
And he also branched heavily into music videos, which often leaned into a darker, edgier persona,
He appeared in the NERD song Provider video.
where he was explicitly cast as a petty drug dealer.
So it seems by this point, the industry was casting him based on his increasingly visible and troubled public image.
Rather than the wholesome potential of, say, The Client.
There's also a family connection tied into this non-film work that we should mention.
Yes, he appeared in the first version of the music video for the 10-year song Wasteland.
And the lead singer of that band, Jesse Hessek, is his cousin.
It's another indication that he was moving away from the big studio system and closer to more personal indie projects.
But despite the diminished spotlight, he was far from inactive.
No, the records show he continued to accumulate supporting and independent film credits all through the early 2000s.
Often in projects that gained critical attention later, even if they weren't box office hits at the time.
We see him in highly praised independent films like Ghost World and Bully.
And also Happy Campers and Tart. All of those were released in 2001.
His later film credits include the psychological thriller The Jacket in 2005, which again showcased his ability to handle complex, intense material.
He also made a memorable, if brief, return to television in the Law & Order Criminal Intent episode watch in 2006.
And crucially, his final film role was in The Informers, which was released posthumously in 2008.
So, while the nature of the work undeniably changed from his breakout years,
Moving from blockbuster lead to indie sporting player.
the sources confirm that he was actively working right up until the end, trying to maintain his career even as his personal life was spiraling.
And now we have to examine that period where his private struggles began to dramatically eclipse his professional life.
It's a painful timeline to go through because it starts when he was still very much a child.
That's what stands out in the documentation. The first major public incident happened in June 1998. Brad Renfro was only 15 years old.
He was arrested near Knoxville alongside a 19-year-old cousin.
And the charges were drug possession. He was caught carrying 2 small bags of cocaine concealed in a cigarette box.
And a bag of marijuana was found in his sock.
The detail of the concealment in the arrest itself, it provides a very stark snapshot of his life at age 15.
Right around the time he was achieving international acclaim for that intensely mature performance in Apt Pupil.
The cognitive dissonance, between his public image as this lauded actor and this reality must have been immense.
The outcome of that initial arrest was a plea bargain. It required him to submit to random drug tests.
But the sources also contain an even more distressing piece of context.
The documentation suggests that by the time he reached the age of 18, Renfro had already been in drug rehabilitation programs more than once.
So this wasn't a late onset issue. The struggle began very, very early in his adolescence.
And the pattern of trouble just escalated dramatically over the next 2 years.
It did. In August 2000, he was 18, and he and a friend attempted a highly publicized and, bizarre act.
They tried to steal a yacht from Fort Lauderdale Harbor.
He was charged with grand theft and criminal mischief.
The attempted yacht theft is particularly jarring because it contrasts so sharply with his celebrity status.
This wasn't a quiet private drug offense. This was high-profile, petty criminality.
The legal consequences followed in January 2001. He was sentenced to 2 years probation.
And perhaps more humbling, he was ordered to pay for the investigative costs and the repair costs for the boat.
By this time, the records reflect a highly complicated public image.
Yes, he was simultaneously regarded as this intense, promising teenage idol, the star of The Client and Apt Pupil.
And yet he was equally known for his highly public drug abuse and his legal issues.
And this inherent conflict made him a magnet for media scrutiny.
And the sources provide his reaction to that scrutiny, which really shows the immense emotional pressure he was under.
He openly lashed out at reporters. He's quoted as saying, "You can just feel the slime on them."
And he was equally harsh toward critics, dismissing them as the fat kids in high school that nobody likes, so they're out there to get you.
This isn't just a celebrity complaining. You get the sense this is a young man who is really struggling and feeling violently attacked by the external narrative of his life.
And this emotional volatility, it certainly didn't help him manage the legal issues.
No, the documentation reveals a continuous cycle of probation violations. In May 2001, he violated probation after being arrested for underage drinking.
Then, in January 2002, he was arrested in Knoxville again, this time for public intoxication and driving without a valid license.
The legal system reacted to this persistent failure to comply.
As a direct result of that January 2002 arrest, he was mandated to enter a 3-month substance abuse treatment program.
This series of arrests clearly demonstrates that his fame and his talent provided no shield against the consequences of his addiction.
Or the difficulty he had maintaining any semblance of sobriety.
The issues followed him across the country as he entered his early 20s in Los Angeles.
In November 2005, he was arrested for DUI, driving under the influence, and charged with 2 counts of driving with a suspended license.
For this, the sentence was 10 days in jail and 18 months of alcohol education classes.
But the crisis reached its most dramatic and its most public peak just a month later.
In December 2005, he was swept up during an undercover drug operation conducted by LAPD officers.
And this was in the notoriously tough Skid Row neighborhood of Los Angeles. He was charged with attempted possession of heroin.
That arrest was a watershed moment. The image of him in handcuffs, a former child star, caught in a major sting operation.
It was front-page news, most notably in the Los Angeles Times.
The documentation shows that during this incident, he actually admitted to a detective that he was actively using both heroin and methadone.
He subsequently pleaded guilty to the attempted possession charge.
The sentence was 3 years probation and a $450 fine.
And he served the combined 10 days in jail related to both the DUI and the attempted possession charge in May of 2006.
If you look at the totality of the record from 1998 to 2006, it's just a constant downward spiral.
Punctuated by these brief legal attempts at rehabilitation that consistently failed.
And that cycle culminated in one final critical warning detailed in the sources.
In June 2007, he was found to have violated his probation yet again.
This time by failing to enroll in a mandated long-term drug treatment program.
And the judge presiding over his case delivered a very stark ultimatum.
He said the next 2 violations would result in immediate mandatory live-in rehabilitation or a lengthy jail sentence.
This severe warning came just months before his death. It shows he was on the absolute razor's edge of incarceration.
It paints a picture of a young man who was trapped, just unable to escape the legal and chemical dependencies that had defined the last decade of his life, even with the threat of jail looming right over his head.
Moving into the final years of his life, the documentation reveals personal details that, well, they remained almost entirely unknown to the public.
And they add another layer of sadness to his complexity.
The most poignant detail concerns his son.
The records indicate that Brad Renfro had a child, a son, born in Japan in 2003.
And he was raised by his mother, a Japanese citizen. This was kept completely private.
Completely. The public was only made aware of the existence of his son when the child was mentioned in Renfro's mother's obituary in 2012.
This hidden family life, it just underscores the extreme dual existence he was maintaining.
Publicly battling addiction and the law in Los Angeles, while privately having this profound connection across the world.
It's a stark contrast to the chaos of his celebrity existence.
What makes the end of his story even more heart-wrenching is the brief but potent moment of reported optimism right before his death.
Yes, his cousin, Jesse Hasek, the lead singer of 10 Years, he spoke about a recent visit.
Hasek stated that Renfro and his son had visited him just days before his death.
And critically, Hasek reported that Renfro felt he had hit rock bottom and had come way back up.
And that he was actively making positive changes in his life.
The documentation suggests that he was striving for improvement, recognizing the severity of his situation.
And perhaps feeling motivated by the presence of his son.
It makes the reality of his death that much harder to bear.
Despite that brief window of hope, Brad Renfro was found dead on January 15, 2008, in his Los Angeles apartment.
He was only 25 years old.
His body was returned to Tennessee for his services, and he was ultimately buried at the Red House Cemetery in Granger County.
The official ruling regarding his death was delivered on February 8, 2008, by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office.
It was ruled accidental, attributed to acute heroin/morphine intoxication.
The documentation points to a devastating final detail involving his grandmother, Joanne Renfro.
The woman who had provided him with structure and love from the age of 5, and who had often traveled with him during his early successful career.
17 days after Brad Renfro's death, Joanne Renfro passed away at the age of 76.
While local officials determined her death was due to natural causes, the timing of these two events, her death following so closely after the loss of the grandson she raised and fought for, it suggests the immeasurable emotional toll his life and death had taken on her.
It is a profoundly sad conclusion to a difficult family story.
The immediate aftermath of Renfro's death forced a public reckoning.
It raised uncomfortable questions about how the industry chooses to memorialize those who die young, especially when their struggles were so intrinsically linked to their public life.
The most immediate controversy detailed in the sources was his exclusion from the in memoriam tribute montage at the 80th Academy Awards,
which were held shortly after his death. This omission was widely reported in the media as a significant snub.
And whether the exclusion was due to his age, his history, or just an oversight.
It immediately prompted a media discussion about celebrity morality and memory.
It highlighted the uncomfortable truth that while the industry celebrates the rise of a child star, it is often reluctant to claim them in death when that star's life has been complicated by addiction and crime.
This media discussion eventually led to a much deeper, more critical analysis.
Yes, sources, particularly detailed investigative pieces published by BuzzFeed years later in 2018 and 2019, they focused on the central question.
Did the film industry have an adequate system in place to protect this specific, highly vulnerable child actor?
These sources went into his contracts and working conditions, And here's the crucial distinction.
The findings indicated that there was no evidence that legal or contractual provisions had been violated while he was physically on the set of his films.
So industry rules regarding schooling and hours were likely followed.
However, the analysis suggested a profound non-contractual failure.
The failure lay in the fact that the industry did not ensure proper, consistent supervision and support when he was off the movie set.
And for a child plucked from a disruptive, unstable background, that transition back to a normal life, loaded with money and adult attention, it proved disastrous without continuous oversight.
This issue circles back perfectly to the premise of his discovery.
The records consistently highlight how Renfro's inherent worldliness caused immense confusion among the adults surrounding him.
They weren't seeing a vulnerable child. They saw a young man who could handle himself.
The anecdotes are truly striking because they demonstrate this blurred line of perception.
The first assistant director on Apt Pupil, for example, recalled seeing the 14-year-old Renfro at a party on set where alcohol was present.
According to the recollection, Renfro was the only attendee who was technically underage.
Yet he was treated as an adult peer.
And this confusion wasn't isolated to just one set.
No. The production designer for Tom and Huck recalled her confusion, believing Renfro to be 15 or 16 during filming.
When the records confirm he was actually only 13 years old.
She also noted that he was dating an older girlfriend during that time.
And this mature perception, it began even earlier.
The documentation shows that the director of the Cura noted that Renfro, at the extremely young age of 12, was receiving sexually suggestive cards from adolescent girls while they were filming in Minnesota.
So this early, unwanted sexualization and adult treatment compounded the difficulty of his situation.
And his adult treatment was reflected in his roles, too. His apparent maturity was a deliberate cinematic tool.
In his early roles, he was frequently shown shirtless, and the shower scene in Apt Pupil generated a lot of discussion.
He was continually performing this intense, dark material involving sexual and violent content.
And it created a profound dissonance. He was legally a minor, but expected to exhibit the emotional weight and experience of an adult.
Often a troubled one.
It raises a powerful point for you, the listener, to consider.
If the people working closest with him, directors, designers, production staff, if they couldn't accurately gauge his legal age or understand his need for protection,
how could the broader industry system possibly protect him once he stepped away from the set?
The qualities they prized in him, the self-sufficiency and the street smarts, they became the very qualities that denied him the protective support he desperately needed.
Despite the public tragedy, we should acknowledge the tributes paid to Renfro following his death. They demonstrate the deep personal impact he had on those in his immediate circle.
One very notable tribute came from someone who knew him well, his former roommate, Mark Foster,
who later became the lead singer of Foster the People.
Foster wrote the song Downtown, which was included on the deluxe edition of their debut album, Torches.
And it directly references the pain and confusion surrounding Renfro's death.
And there was also the artistic homage from actor James Franco.
Franco publicly expressed his admiration for Renfro's talent, going so far as to have the name Brad tattooed on his right shoulder.
He also produced a very small, limited edition series of switchblades that were engraved with the words Brad Renfro and Forever.
These tributes, they reflect a private grief and a recognition of genuine artistic talent.
They offer a contrast to the cold, clinical record of his arrests and the subsequent media silence from Hollywood.
Reflecting on all the documents we have analyzed, the story of Brad Renfro is devastating primarily because of its speed and its seeming inevitability.
He was perfectly cast as the tough kid who understood hardship, yet that toughness masked a profound vulnerability.
His real-life struggles quickly morphed into chronic headline news.
And he ultimately succumbed to the addiction that shadowed virtually his entire adult life. It's the story of tremendous potential that was lost far too soon.
The documentation compels us to look past the tragedy and ask what systemic lessons can be learned.
Given the repeated and documented confusion surrounding Renfro's age and maturity, the fact that adults consistently overestimated his ability to cope with adult situations.
What ongoing responsibility does an industry take when it actively seeks out and rewards street smarts and premature worldliness in its youngest performers?
Does celebrating a young person's apparent self-sufficiency inadvertently deny them the necessary protective structure and support that they, regardless of how they look on screen, are legally and psychologically entitled to?
That question remains central to the legacy of Brad Renfro.
Indeed, it's the central irony of his story.
Thanks for listening.